A young nurse saved a little boy during a tornado storm. Unaware his dad is a billionaire. He transformed her life the next day. It was a cold Monday morning in Kentucky when the earth vibrated. Lucy, just about to start her shift at the hospital, felt the ground shake beneath her feet. At first, she thought it was just her imagination, perhaps too much coffee or lack of sleep. But then, the walls creaked, and the floor beneath her buckled ever so slightly. Her instincts kicked in, but there was no time to wonder what was happening. The sound of the tornado siren shrieked through the building, louder than the whistling wind outside. Lucy's breath caught in her throat. She knew what that meant. Before she could even gather her thoughts, the storm struck. The wind outside intensified, its howls growing into deafening roars. The hospital building rattled under the pressure, shaking as if it were nothing more than a fragile paper box in the wind. Glass windows trembled, and the ground seemed to shift under her feet. The air felt charged with a sinister energy, the kind that made her heart race. But Lucy couldn't afford to panic. She had been through storms before. She knew what to do. As the sound of the tornado drew closer, she steadied herself and took a deep breath, mentally preparing herself for what was to come. This wasn't just a storm. It was a battle for safety, for survival. Her first instinct was to move patients into secure areas. The emergency shelter in the basement was the safest place, so she began guiding people in that direction. With her background in emergency response, Lucy quickly took charge, barking orders at the nurses and doctors around her. Move everyone to the basement. Secure the rooms. Keep the windows covered, she said firmly, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. Her calmness was contagious. Others began to follow her lead, rallying together in the face of danger. Lucy helped the elderly patients and those in the most fragile condition to move to the shelter. She checked on each room to ensure that everyone was accounted for. As the storm raged outside, she could hear the building creaking and groaning under the pressure. The power flickered, and the emergency lights came on, casting an eerie glow across the hallways. She turned a corner to check on the pediatric wing, her mind racing through the list of patients. She quickly checked in with the pediatric nurse, making sure the children were all safe. It was in that moment, in the midst of the noise and panic, that Lucy spotted him. A small, terrified boy stood at the end of the hallway. No older than 10, his eyes wide with fear and tears streaming down his face. He was clutching a stuffed dinosaur, the plush toy seeming oddly out of place amidst the chaos. Lucy froze for a moment, her heart immediately going out to him. She recognized him from earlier. He had come in with his father for a routine checkup, but now, in the madness of the storm, no one seemed to have noticed him. No one, except Lucy. Her heart squeezed in her chest, and without thinking, she rushed toward him. The child's eyes locked onto hers, pleading for comfort. Lucy knelt down in front of him, her voice soft but firm. "Hey, little one, it's okay. I'm here to help you." He looked up at her, his lip trembling. "I can't find my dad," he whispered. Lucy's stomach dropped. She had seen this kind of fear in children before, when they were separated from their families in the chaos of an emergency. It was a fear that was hard to shake, one that lingered in their eyes long after the storm passed. "Don't worry," Lucy reassured him, trying to keep her own nerves in check. "We'll find your dad. I promise you." But just as she said that, the wind picked up once more, and the entire building seemed to shudder. The sound of the tornado intensified, and the walls of the hospital groaned. Without warning, the air seemed to shift, and everything around them shook violently. The building rattled like it was about to collapse, and dust began to fill the air. A sound of ripping metal filled the room as the wind tore at the structure. Without hesitation, Lucy scooped Damien into her arms, pushing him behind her. The wind outside slammed against the hospital, and debris began to fall from the ceiling. Lucy barely had time to react as a large piece of plaster broke free from the ceiling and came crashing down. She threw herself on top of Damien, shielding him with her body as the walls around them shook and trembled. They were tossed to the ground as the storm's fury raged on. The force of the wind seemed to tear the very fabric of the building apart. Lucy's heart pounded in her chest as she held Damien tight, trying to protect him from the falling debris. The sound of crashing metal, breaking glass, and the roar of the wind made everything feel like a nightmare. But through it all, Lucy stayed focused. She had to keep him safe. They scrambled, moving through the wreckage, crawling on the floor, ducking beneath the debris that continued to fall. The world outside was a blur of darkness and destruction, but inside this small corner of the hospital, Lucy refused to give up. Damien's grip on her hand was tight, and Lucy could feel his body trembling in fear, but she didn't let go. She kept whispering to him, trying to calm him, to assure him that everything would be all right. The storm wasn't finished yet, but they had to keep moving. They couldn't afford to wait. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they managed to crawl to a corner under a staircase where the structure of the building seemed more stable. Lucy shielded Damien with her body as they huddled together in the small space, the storm's fury tearing through the rest of the hospital. The wind howled outside, a banshee's wail, and the building creaked as if it might collapse at any moment. But Lucy stayed with him, holding him close, determined to protect him at all costs. It was her job, after all. She was a nurse, a protector, and in that moment, she was all Damien had. As they huddled together in the darkness, Lucy's mind raced. She had seen so many things in her career, suffering, tragedy, pain, but nothing compared to this. The raw power of nature, the sheer chaos of the storm, was unlike anything she had ever experienced. But still, she fought to stay calm. She had to. For Damien. For everyone who needed her. The storm outside raged on, but in their small corner, time seemed to stand still. Minutes passed, maybe hours, but Lucy didn't know. She only knew one thing. She couldn't let go. Not now. Not until the storm passed. She whispered to Damien, "It's going to be okay. I'm here with you. We're safe now." And in that moment, with the storm raging outside, Lucy held on tight, refusing to let go of the tiny life in her arms. She wasn't going to let anything happen to him. Not while she was there. The storm had passed, but the silence that followed was almost more unsettling. The wind, which had torn through the hospital with such fury, had now died down, leaving an eerie calm in its wake. Lucy and Damien remained huddled under the staircase for what felt like hours, but neither of them had the courage to move. The air was thick with dust, the building shuddering in the aftermath of the tornado's rage. The hospital, once a place of healing and safety, now lay in ruins. Lucy finally shifted, carefully adjusting her position. Her body ached from the cramped space, and the silence around them felt suffocating. She turned to check on Damien, still clinging to her, his small body trembling with fear. He was alive, but shaken, his wide eyes still filled with disbelief. She gently brushed his hair out of his face, offering him a weak smile, trying to reassure him with the little strength she had left. "Damien," she whispered, her voice hoarse, "we're going to be okay. It's over now." But the storm had taken its toll. The once pristine hospital was now a shadow of its former self. The walls were cracked and crumbled, windows shattered, and debris was scattered everywhere. The hallways that had once bustled with activity were now eerily silent, save for the occasional groan of the building settling under the weight of its damage. It was impossible to tell just how much destruction the tornado had caused, but it was clear that it was substantial. The distant sound of sirens filled the air, a reminder that the world outside was still in turmoil. People were calling for help, but the wreckage seemed to drown out their voices. Lucy's heart ached as she thought of the others who hadn't been as fortunate as her and Damien. There were people in the hospital who hadn't made it to safety in time, and now, as the storm subsided, they were left to face the consequences of its devastation. Lucy and Damien crawled out from their hiding spot, the dust swirling around them as they emerged into the broken hallway. The sight was almost too much to bear. The floor was littered with debris, broken furniture, medical equipment, scattered papers, and glass. It was as if the tornado had torn through the very soul of the building. Lucy took a deep breath, steadying herself. She needed to focus, needed to help. The sound of Damien's quiet sobs brought her back to the moment. She knelt down beside him, offering him a comforting hand. "We need to find your dad," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. They began to make their way through the wreckage, carefully stepping over the debris as they moved deeper into the hospital. Lucy's eyes scanned the hallways, her mind racing with concern for the other patients and staff members who might still be trapped or injured. Her thoughts were briefly interrupted when she heard a familiar voice calling out in the distance. "Damien! Damien!" Lucy's heart skipped a beat. It was the voice of a man, deep, but filled with desperation. She followed the sound of the voice, her pulse quickening. She turned a corner, and there, in the midst of the devastation, she saw him. Ethan Cole, a tall, quiet man with a commanding presence, stood among the wreckage. His clothes were disheveled, his face pale and streaked with dirt and dust, but his eyes were wild with concern. He was frantic, searching for his son, his every step laced with fear. When he spotted Damien, his expression changed instantly, relief flooding over him like a wave. Damien's face lit up as he saw his father. His legs wobbled as he rushed forward, throwing himself into Ethan's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Ethan caught him, holding him tightly, his strong arms enveloping his son as he whispered over and over, "I thought I lost you. I thought I lost you." Lucy stood back, watching the emotional reunion unfold before her. She felt a lump form in her throat, her own exhaustion and emotions catching up with her. She had done it. She had kept him safe. She had promised that she would, and now, here they were, alive, together, despite the destruction around them. Ethan's gaze shifted toward Lucy, and for the first time, she saw the depth of his gratitude in his eyes. His voice was thick with emotion as he stepped forward. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking. "Thank you for saving him. You've given me back my world." Lucy, though exhausted and emotionally drained, managed a tired but sincere smile. "It was nothing," she said quietly, brushing a strand of hair out of her face. "I was just doing my job." But Ethan shook his head, stepping closer. "No," he said firmly. "You don't understand. You kept him safe. You saved him. I'll never be able to thank you enough for that." Lucy felt a weight lift off her shoulders, but her exhaustion was starting to catch up with her. The adrenaline that had kept her going through the storm was beginning to wear off. Her legs wobbled slightly as she tried to stay steady. She had been through so much in the past few hours, taking charge, keeping Damien safe, and helping as many patients as she could in the middle of the storm. "I'm just glad he's okay," she said, her voice quiet now. "That's all that matters." Ethan nodded, his grip on Damien tightening as the boy continued to cling to him. He paused for a moment, his expression thoughtful, before he spoke again. "I don't know how to repay you for what you've done. He hesitated, looking around at the devastation, and then back to her. "I want to make sure you're taken care of." Lucy wasn't sure how to respond. She hadn't expected anything in return. She had done her job, and that was enough. But Ethan seemed determined to express his gratitude in some way. "I don't need anything," Lucy said gently, trying to dismiss the idea. "I'm just a nurse, doing what I'm trained to do." But Ethan wasn't backing down. He looked at her for a long moment, as if measuring her sincerity, before he spoke again. "Please, let me do something for you. You've given me back my son, and I'll never forget that." Lucy hesitated, unsure of how to respond. But before she could say anything, Ethan took a step forward, his expression more serious now. "Can I have your number? I know it's not much, but I want to make sure you're taken care of. You've earned it." Lucy blinked, a little surprised by the sudden shift in conversation. She had no idea what to say. Her first instinct was to refuse, but there was something in Ethan's eyes, something genuine. He wasn't offering her anything out of obligation. He was offering it because he felt deeply grateful. After a brief, awkward silence, Lucy nodded. "Okay," she said softly, taking a step forward and pulling out a small piece of paper from her pocket. She quickly scribbled down her number and handed it to him. "Thank you," she added quietly. Ethan took the paper with a grateful nod, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're a good person, Lucy. Thank you again. I'll make sure you're never forgotten for what you did today." She nodded but didn't speak. The weight of the day was settling in, and all she could think about now was getting some rest. As Ethan and Damien began to walk toward the exit, Lucy turned away, her steps slow and deliberate. She needed to check on the rest of the hospital and make sure the survivors were okay. The chaos of the storm was over, but the real work was just beginning. The world outside had been changed forever by the storm, but Lucy knew that, in that moment, she had made a difference. She had kept her promise, and in doing so, she had helped save not just a child's life, but a family's future. It was the kind of moment she'd never forget, one that would stay with her for the rest of her life. The next day, after the storm had passed, Elkhorn was finally still. The destruction left behind by the tornado was unimaginable, but for now, the air was calm, the wind had died down, and the world seemed to breathe again. The once raging storm had given way to a quiet, uneasy peace. The damage was evident in the wrecked buildings, fallen trees, and scattered debris, but amidst the chaos, there was a subtle promise of renewal. The people of Elkhorn would rebuild. Lucy sat in her small apartment, physically and emotionally drained. The adrenaline from the day before was fading, leaving her exhausted, but there was a certain relief in knowing the worst was over. The hospital was in ruins, yes, but it had weathered the storm. No lives had been lost, and for Lucy, that was all that mattered. She was alone now, finally able to catch her breath. The world outside was still and quiet, as if the entire town was holding its breath, waiting for the dust to settle. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden light across the ruined streets. It was peaceful, almost surreal, as if nothing had happened at all. Lucy wrapped herself in a blanket and sat on her couch, sipping slowly from a mug of tea. Her mind wandered back to the events of the previous day. She thought of little Damien, his tear-streaked face, and how she'd held him as the storm raged. She could still feel the weight of his tiny body in her arms, the fear that had filled his eyes. The memory brought a lump to her throat. In that moment, she had done what needed to be done, but she couldn't shake the sense of responsibility that clung to her even now. She had saved him, but so many had been affected by the storm. She couldn't help but wonder about the others who hadn't been as fortunate as Damien. The phone rang, pulling Lucy from her thoughts. Her heart skipped a beat as she saw the caller ID. It was an unfamiliar number, and for a moment, she debated whether to answer. She wasn't sure who it could be, but something told her it was important. She pressed the phone to her ear and heard Ethan's voice on the other end. "Hello, Lucy." His voice was calm but filled with sincerity. "Ethan?" Lucy asked, surprised. She hadn't expected to hear from him so soon after everything that had happened. "Yes, it's me," Ethan said, his voice tinged with emotion. "I just wanted to reach out and thank you again. You've no idea how much you did for us." "For Damien." Lucy sat up straighter on the couch, feeling the weight of his words. "You don't need to thank me," she said softly. "I just did what I had to do." "I know," Ethan replied, "but I need to meet with you. I want to discuss something. There's something I need to say to you in person. I know you must be exhausted, but if you could come by my office, I'd really appreciate it." Lucy paused, surprised by his request. Meet with him? After everything that had happened, she hadn't expected anything more than a quick thank you. But there was something in his voice, a sincerity, a gratitude, that made her hesitate. She had already done so much, but still, she couldn't ignore the feeling that this conversation was important. She had given him back his son. That alone seemed worth more than any words of gratitude. "Okay," she said, her voice a little uncertain. "I'll come by, but it might take me a little while to get there." "Take your time," Ethan said, his tone light but serious. "I'll be waiting." The conversation ended, and Lucy sat there for a moment, the phone still pressed to her ear. She hadn't expected this. What could Ethan possibly want to talk to her about? She hadn't done anything special, just her job. But the fact that he wanted to meet, it piqued her curiosity. She had to admit, she was intrigued. Lucy quickly got dressed, her mind still spinning with questions. What was going on? She didn't know, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a simple thank you. There was more to it than that. As she stepped out the door and into the cool evening air, she couldn't help but wonder what Ethan had in mind. What could someone like him want from a nurse like her? The drive to Ethan's office was short, but the quiet streets of Elkhorn felt surreal. The town was slowly coming back to life, but the damage was still too fresh to ignore. Lucy passed homes with broken windows and collapsed roofs, but the people seemed to be coming together, beginning to rebuild their lives. It was both heartening and heartbreaking, a reminder that life could go on even in the wake of destruction. When she arrived at Ethan's office, she was taken aback. The building was far more impressive than she had imagined. Its sleek glass facade towered over the surrounding buildings, an undeniable symbol of wealth and power. The contrast between this building and the humble streets of Elkhorn felt jarring. She stood for a moment at the entrance, unsure if she truly belonged here, but with a deep breath, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The receptionist greeted her with a warm smile and directed her toward the elevator. As Lucy rode up to Ethan's office, she tried to steady her nerves. The air felt thick, the quiet hum of the elevator amplifying her thoughts. What was this all about? Why did Ethan want to meet with her? She wasn't sure, but she had a sinking feeling that whatever was coming next would change everything. When the elevator doors opened, Lucy stepped into a sleek, minimalist office space. The walls were lined with dark wood and polished metal accents, and floor-to-ceiling windows offered a sweeping view of the town below. It was nothing like the hospital, nothing like the small, quiet town she had known. This place was different. Ethan's office, like the building, was luxurious and cold, an embodiment of success. Ethan was waiting for her by a large desk, his posture tall and composed. He looked exactly as he had the day before, though now, in this environment, he seemed more distant, more like the figure of authority he likely was. He greeted her with a smile, but there was an underlying seriousness to his demeanor. "Lucy," he said, stepping forward as she entered. "Thank you again for coming." She nodded, still unsure of what to expect. "Of course," she replied, her voice slightly uncertain. "You said you wanted to talk." Ethan gestured to a chair across from him. "Please, sit. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but there's something important I need to say to you." Lucy sat down, her curiosity growing. Ethan reached into his desk drawer and pulled out an envelope. His expression was serious now, and Lucy felt a sense of tension building in the air. "I know this is a bit unconventional, but I want to offer you something," Ethan said, placing the envelope on the desk in front of her. His gaze met hers, steady and sincere. "What you did for my son. For me, it's impossible to put into words. But please, let me do something for you." Lucy stared at the envelope, her heart beginning to race. She wasn't sure what to expect, but this was far beyond anything she had imagined. Ethan's voice softened as he spoke. "This isn't just a thank you, Lucy. This is an acknowledgement of what you've done for my family, for Damien. And I want you to have it." He pushed the envelope toward her, and Lucy hesitated before reaching for it. The weight of the moment felt heavy, but she could sense that this was something important, something life-changing. She slowly opened the envelope, pulling out a check. Her hands trembled as she saw the figure written on the paper. "For $100,000, she whispered, unable to believe what she was seeing. Ethan nodded. "Please, Lucy, you saved my son's life. This is the least I can do to show my gratitude." She stared at the check, her mind spinning. I can't accept this," she said, her voice shaky. Ethan's expression softened, his voice sincere. "You must. You've done so much more than I can repay. This is my way of showing you just how much your actions mean to me and my family." Lucy sat there, unsure of what to say. She had never asked for anything, never expected anything, and yet here it was, an offer she couldn't deny, an opportunity she had never imagined. For the first time in her life, Lucy realized that sometimes, the world didn't just offer words of thanks, it offered something more, something real. And for better or worse, it was up to her to decide whether to accept it. Lucy sat there, staring at the check in her hands, the numbers blurred before her eyes. The figure, for $100,000, felt impossible to comprehend. She had been through so much over the past 24 hours, had faced a storm that had torn through her life and her town, and had done everything she could to keep a frightened little boy safe. But now, in the quiet stillness of Ethan's office, everything seemed so surreal. Her fingers trembled slightly as she traced the edge of the check. How could this be real? She had simply done her job. She hadn't expected anything in return, not a single cent. But here it was, the kind of reward that could change her life. Ethan was offering her something far beyond gratitude. It was an amount of money she couldn't have imagined, couldn't have dreamed of. I don't know what to say," Lucy finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. She looked up at Ethan, unsure of how to respond to the overwhelming gesture. Ethan remained calm, his eyes steady and patient. "You don't need to say anything, Lucy. Just know that this is from the bottom of my heart. I can never truly repay you for what you did for my family, but this is my way of saying thank you. My son's life, my whole life, was changed because of you." Lucy shook her head, still unable to fully grasp the weight of the situation. "I didn't do it for this. I was just trying to do my job." Ethan leaned forward slightly, his gaze softening as he watched her. "I know you didn't, but you did something that most people wouldn't have been able to do. You stayed calm in the face of unimaginable danger. You protected my son when I couldn't be there. That's something extraordinary, Lucy." Her throat tightened as his words sunk in. She hadn't seen herself as extraordinary, not at all. She had just done what she was trained to do, what she felt was right. She hadn't thought about accolades, rewards, or recognition. All she had focused on was the frightened little boy in her arms, the overwhelming responsibility of keeping him safe, and doing everything she could to get them both through the storm. "But this," she said, gesturing toward the check, "this is too much. I never expected anything like this." "I understand," Ethan said, his voice soft. "But you deserve it. Please take it. You're not just a nurse, Lucy. You're a hero, and heroes deserve to be recognized." Lucy's heart pounded in her chest, a mixture of gratitude and discomfort flooding through her. She couldn't bring herself to accept something this large, this generous. It felt wrong. She had done what she did out of instinct, out of a deep sense of responsibility. She had protected Damien, but she had done it because it was the right thing to do. This wasn't about money, and it wasn't about getting something in return. But Ethan's expression remained unwavering. "Please, Lucy," he urged, his voice firm but kind. "If you don't take this, I'll feel like I haven't done enough. You've given me back my son, my family. This is the least I can do." There was no denying the sincerity in his voice. Ethan wasn't just offering her money. He was offering something deeper, a recognition of her selflessness, a symbol of how much he valued what she had done. It wasn't just a check. It was a gesture of gratitude from a father who had seen his world almost torn apart, and who was now doing everything in his power to make sure Lucy knew how much he meant to him. Lucy's gaze flickered back to the check, and then to Ethan. She saw the kindness in his eyes, the deep gratitude that he had yet to fully express. She had never been one to accept things easily, especially not from someone like Ethan, someone whose wealth and success seemed so distant from her humble life. But in that moment, Lucy realized something important. She had made a real difference in someone's life. She had given Ethan back what he had feared he'd lost. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth more than any monetary value. Taking a deep breath, Lucy placed the check back into the envelope. I'll take it," she said quietly. "But not for me. I want to use it to do something meaningful. Something that will help people, the way I was able to help Damien." Ethan nodded, a soft smile touching his lips. "That's all I ask. Do something good with it. Use it in a way that honors what you've done." Lucy felt a weight lift off her shoulders. It wasn't the check itself that she struggled with, but the idea of taking something so significant without knowing how to use it properly. But now, with Ethan's words, she felt a sense of direction. She could do something meaningful with this money. Maybe it would help rebuild the hospital or fund a new program for children in need of medical care. Whatever it was, she would find a way to put it to use in a way that made a real impact. For the first time in her life, Lucy felt the power of being truly seen, truly appreciated, for who she was, for the work she did. The recognition felt like a beacon in the darkness of the storm, a reminder that even in the midst of devastation, there was kindness, there was gratitude, and there was the potential to do something greater than herself. Ethan stood, walking over to her with a firm handshake. "Thank you again, Lucy. You've done more for my family than you'll ever know." Lucy shook his hand, still overwhelmed by the kindness and generosity in his words. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice steady now. "I didn't do it for recognition, but I'm grateful for your trust and for this opportunity." The moment lingered, but Lucy could feel the shift in her heart, a sense of closure beginning to settle in. She had come into this meeting uncertain, unsure of what Ethan expected, and now she felt as though a new chapter was unfolding in front of her. The money wasn't just a reward, it was a key to something bigger. As she left Ethan's office, the weight of the check still in her hand, Lucy felt a mixture of emotions. There was excitement, yes, but also a deep sense of responsibility. She had always believed that her work was its own reward, that the act of caring for others was the only payment she needed. But now, for the first time in her life, she was given something she could use to create something more lasting. She didn't know yet what that would look like, whether it would be a program for medical relief, or perhaps a foundation for children's health. But Lucy knew one thing for certain. Whatever she did, it would be for others. The storm had taken so much from Elkhorn, but in the midst of it, she had found a new purpose. And with that purpose came a new sense of responsibility, one she was ready to embrace. As she stepped outside into the cool evening air, the weight of the past 24 hours settled into her bones. The storm had passed, but the journey was far from over. And Lucy was ready for whatever came next. Thank you so much for sticking with us through this journey. If you enjoyed the story, make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let us know what you think about Lucy's journey, her incredible act of bravery, and how it all ended. Do you agree with her decision to accept the reward? How did you feel about Ethan's gesture? Also, don't forget to rate the story on a scale of 1 to 10. Let us know how we did. And we'd love to know where you're watching from, so feel free to drop your location in the comments. Thanks again for watching, and we hope to see you again soon.